I know the sign said Kids Corn Maze, but that didn't stop us. Autumn was in the air, and we were feeling the Halloween spirit. Besides, I think being a young couple, still madly in love, allows you to do some kid stuff. It becomes less about the thrill of kid stuff, and more about the thrill of being together. The cutesy kid stuff becomes whimsical and charming. I'm pretty sure my girlfriend agreed with me. Lacey and I had been together for about 6 months at that point, and she told me all about Farmer Pete's Halloween haunt over at Downey Farms. It had been something of a family tradition for her since she was young. She didn't want this to be the first year she didn't go. Her parents were no longer around, and her sister had gone last weekend with her husband and their kids. Usually they brought her with them, but not this year. I suppose they figured she'd want to go with me instead. I'd never actually done anything at Downey Farms before. Sure, I'd gone to the storefront to buy produce with my own family, but I'd never done any of their seasonal activities. They really were more for the kids, but we weren't the only couple who'd gone. My friend Steven told me he'd gone with his girlfriend last year, and he'd seemed to really enjoy it. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't just as excited for it as she was. This was special to her, and so, of course, it was also special to me. After just 6 months, I could tell I wanted to spend the rest of my life with Lacey. She was a short brunette with an infectious smile, and the cutest laugh I'd ever heard. I'd always thought of myself as a funny guy, and loved to make bad jokes. Admittedly, I did try too hard sometimes, but Lacey didn't care. She usually laughed anyways, especially if the jokes were bad or just outright dark. We seemed to share the same morbid sense of humor. The sun was low in the sky by the time we got to the farm. We'd both enjoyed sleeping in before meeting up for lunch and watching a movie together. I'd hoped the crowds at the farm would be gone, but it seemed the attractions were far more popular than I'd anticipated. "Watch out for the stroller," Lacey said as we were looking for a place to park. A young family with 2 little kids was making their way down the grass field that was being used for parking and toward us. "I'll go for the parents instead," I said, and she giggled. "If you get them both, maybe one of the kids will grow up into Batman." She raised her eyebrows playfully at me. I stopped the car and let the family pass. Their baby was fast asleep, but their little girl looked at my Nissan Rogue as she passed. She had big blue eyes and was as cute as a button. I hoped I'd have a kid like that someday. We found a parking spot and made our way deeper into the farm. There'd been a good turnout that day. A tractor pulled a cart full of people to the different attractions set up along the farm. Lacey looked at the program on her phone. "So we got the haunted house, the fairy village, corn maze, pony rides," she said, along with a few other things I wouldn't remember later. I could see the pony rides up ahead, along with the entrance to the corn maze. "Then the haunted hayride begins at 8, she added. "So we got about 4 hours. The farm was bathed in the golden glow of late afternoon, and I wasn't entirely sure there'd even be 4 hours worth of activities. "Well, let's explore first and see what comes to us," I said. That seemed good enough for her. We started walking towards one of the distant barns. I could see the haunted house up ahead, and beside it was a pen with a few of the farm animals. A couple of goats and a tiny horse. "No thanks, we're already well fed. We don't need any more," said a sign on the fence. Lacey stopped a few feet away from it and admired a goat eating some of the fallen autumn leaves. She grinned with an almost childlike wonder at it, and I found myself grinning too. The goat continued to eat obliviously, as it began to shit without a care in the world. Lacey looked at me, smile fading as she shook her head. Gross. I just chuckled at the obscene absurdity of it all. I guess he wants some privacy. "Hey, the haunted house is just over there. You want to check it out?" She looked over at it before giving a shrug. "Sure." I took her hand as we headed over. I could sense a bit of apprehension as we approached. I knew she didn't particularly enjoy haunted houses, but I appreciated the fact that she tried. "Are you here for the haunted house?" asked the girl in front of us. She couldn't have been older than 17. I told her that we were. "All right, what scare level do you want? Low, medium, or high?" I looked at Lacey and raised an eyebrow. She looked at me, eyebrows raised in turn. Without speaking a word, we had an entire conversation where we negotiated the terms of how scary we wanted the haunted house. Medium, I finally said. Lacey seemed fine with that. The girl opened the door of the haunted house, stuck her head through, and screamed, "Medium!" before closing the door and grinning at us. "You can go right in." I took Lacey's hand and smiled as I led her through the medium haunted house experience. The set was pretty nice. There were rooms full of creepy dolls, spider webs, and hanging body parts. Just the atmosphere was enough to creep me out a little. The people wandering through the set and screaming at us were mostly out of costume, but they did their jobs decently. A teenager in a Maple Leafs jersey seemed to be stalking us from the other side of the far wall. As we made our way through the rooms, she'd peek her head through holes in the wall to scream at the top of her lungs. Every time Lacey flinched, the teenage girl grinned and snickered. That was the worst of it, though. Lacey was tense and laughing nervously by the time we left, and I kissed her hand to thank her for trying for me. "That was all right," she said softly. "Screaming was a bit much." "Kinda was. Glad we settled on medium. Kinda wish we did low, actually." "Next time," she said, cracking a soft smile. She had the cutest smile in the world. Up ahead, I spotted a sign for the corn maze. "Want to give that a try?" I asked, gesturing to it. "Yeah, for sure, let's do it." She squeezed my hand as we headed towards the maze. The old stalks of corn stood tall, and a wooden sign depicting a zombie pointed the way. The word "Enter" was written across his arm. Lacey and I watched as a small family disappeared into the corn, and we followed them. The fallen stalks across the dirt path crunched under our feet as we made our way through the maze. Above the corn, I could see the grain silo against the late afternoon sky. It was a useful landmark to give me an idea as to where we were. "Left or right?" Lacey asked as we reached a fork. The family ahead of us was long gone. Right," I said. It looked like it went deeper into the maze, and honestly, I kind of wanted to get lost. It was part of the experience, wasn't it? Lacey just smiled and made her way down the right-hand path, and I followed her. "Oh, honey, look." She paused as I caught up with her. "It's Elsa." Propped up on a post in the corn was the vaguely human shape of the beloved Ice Queen from Frozen. She looked to be just a human-shaped sack dressed in clothes with a face painted on. An old blue dress and white shawl adorned the figure. She had no hair, but someone had tied a wig into a braid and draped it over her shoulder. It was as good as it needed to be. "That's cute," Lacey said, and I snapped a picture. She continued onwards and stopped to point at an Olaf a few feet away. "He's even got a little sign," she said. I could see it down by his feet. "How many stomachs does a cow have?" There were 4 possible answers down below. "That's cute," Lacey said again as we continued on. A few feet later, we also saw Peppa Pig and her family, as well as what I think were Paw Patrol characters. Lacey didn't stop to fawn over these ones as much, but we did call them out as we saw them. We paused for the little educational signs as well. "Did you know that baby goats are called kids?" She read off one of them. She looked at me. "I don't know, did you know that?" "I had no idea," I said, half jokingly. Lacey nudged me as we continued on. "Is that Frozen again?" I asked as I saw a white shawl in the corn ahead of us. Her eyes narrowed as she approached. "Looks like it, yeah. That's Elsa. Did we go in a circle?" She looked around, but this area of the maze didn't seem familiar. "I don't think so." "Maybe they just repeat," I said and shrugged. Lacey seemed to accept that as an answer. "Probably." She looked down the aisles of the maze, and I looked around for the grain silo I'd been using to keep us oriented. "Let's try left," I said when I spotted it. "That should take us closer to the exit." Lacey continued off to the left, and as she did, I heard movement behind me. On instinct, I looked back, expecting to see some other patrons of the maze approaching us from behind. Instead, I saw nothing. Not even the white shawl of Elsa the dummy. I frowned, but kept walking. I didn't think too much of it. There wasn't really a reason to suspect anything sinister. Not yet, at least. Lacey stopped ahead of me when she saw another trivia sign. This one had been knocked over. She bent down to pick it up and set it right, but her brow furrowed as she read it. "How many children did Lightning McQueen kill?" she murmured and looked at me. Lightning McQueen didn't kill kids. Teenagers pulling a prank, maybe? I asked as I read the sign. I turned it around and knocked it into the corn, then gave the base a kick to hide it. That's just mean. Kids might read that. Lacey nodded in agreement before continuing deeper into the maze. Around a bend in the corn, we paused as we reached a dead end. The Paw Patrol figures were waiting for us. There were 4 dogs painted on old sacks, and they were placed side by side at the edge of the corn. Their eyes stared down the narrow rows, directly at us. It felt like they were waiting for us. "Guess we're intruding," Lacey murmured. "They look upset." She smiled at me and began to turn around. I didn't leave just yet, though. They did kinda look upset. Their eyes seemed way too focused on us. I turned away, looking back as if I was expecting them to follow me. The Paw Patrol did no such thing. They just continued to stare. Of course they did. They were just sacks painted to look like fictional dogs. They'd probably been put there to soften the blow of a dead end for any kids. This was a kid-friendly maze, after all. There's another one of those signs," Lacey said from up ahead of me. "What's it say this time?" "How many teeth does Tom Hanks have?" I looked over her shoulder at the sign, which read exactly that. But the multiple choice answers underneath were even weirder. 32, 427, 8021, or infinite. "If that's supposed to be a joke, I don't get it," I said. "Me neither," Lacey murmured. She looked up at the maze ahead of us and bit her lip as she spotted Sheriff Woody peeking out of the corn rows. "Christ, that's not creepy at all," I murmured. "It's just a prank, hon." I took her hand and escorted her past the beloved animated sheriff, glaring suspiciously at him all the while. "Let's just get out of this maze," Lacey said. "This is starting to wear out its welcome." We picked up the pace as we walked. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear movement in the corn. The sky was a pastel pink with orange hues, and the air around us was dead silent. No kids, no animals, just our footsteps and the rustling in the corn. Lacey looked back anxiously and held my hand tight. Ahead of us, I saw another sign with a farm fact posted on it. "When you die, who takes you to hell?" I didn't stop to let Lacey get a good look at it. I just kept walking. "We should be almost out," I murmured as I looked at the grain silo against the darkening sky. It seemed a lot closer than it had before. That was good, right? "Yeah." She didn't sound convinced. Still, we kept walking. We kept walking until we saw shapes ahead of us. Then we both stopped in our tracks. Lacey's hands went to her mouth, as if masking a scream. I could only stare in horror. In the path ahead of us were 3 corpses. Not props. Real corpses. They'd belonged to the family who had come in ahead of us. I recognized the jacket on the little boy, who thankfully lay face down in the dirt. I would have broken down crying if I'd had to see his face. The father lay partially in the corn, eyes staring vacantly up into the sky. His mouth was open in a scream of terror, and blood trickled down his slit throat. The mother lay in a heap on the ground. I could see blood on her white shirt, though, enough to stain parts of it a dark red. The blood was still wet. These were fresh kills. "Oh my God," Lacey murmured. "Oh my God." She pressed herself against me, and I wrapped my arms protectively around her. "I'll call the police," I murmured, and reached for my phone. Attempting to dial anything failed, though. I had no signal. Neither did Lacey. My heart skipped a beat as I heard the corn rustle behind us. Both of us turned around immediately. There, standing in the middle of the corn maze, was Peppa Pig. The burlap she was made from was stained with blood. The wooden post that had kept her in place was planted firmly in the ground, and she stared at us defiantly. She sure as hell hadn't been there before. "We're leaving. Now, I murmured. I looked up at the silo before taking Lacey's hand and pulling her into the corn. I was done with the maze. I just wanted out. We moved as fast as we could, and I kept that silo in sight. It wasn't far. Maybe just a 5-minute walk. We could make it 5 minutes, right? Behind me, I could hear the corn rustling. I could hear movement. My heart was racing, and I almost stopped when I heard Lacey cry out. Lacey! It's okay. It's another fucking sign. There, amongst the corn, I could see it. In the fading twilight, I could only barely read the text. Who will find you when we are done? Your mother? Your father? The police? No one. The words "no one" were circled in blood. I looked up, just past the sign and through the corn. I could see something blue and white. I could only barely make out the painted-on eyes of Elsa watching us. And beside her, I swore I could see Sheriff Woody. There was a rustling beside us, and I turned to see Peppa Pig, almost close enough to touch us. Lacey let out a startled cry and shrank back. I grabbed her hand and started to run. It was barely a minute before we broke through the corn. But by God, that minute felt like it took forever. We did break through, though, and found ourselves on another path of the maze. Damn it, Lacey murmured. Let's just cut through the corn again, then we'll call the cops. I wasn't so sure that was a good idea. The grain silo didn't seem to be any closer. It seemed to be in the exact same place. I don't think we should, I said. I think they didn't like that. Lacey opened her mouth to argue with me, before falling silent. The corn rustled around us, and she inched closer to me. Maybe they didn't, she murmured. Let's just go then. We'll get out normally. She took my hand and took off down the row. Our walking quickly turned into running. I spotted additional signs on the path, more than I'd seen before. I briefly caught glimpses of Woody, Elsa, Peppa Pig, and others amongst the corn. Pooh Bear watched us from one fork in the road, and when I looked back, I saw him and Tigger standing side by side in the path, as if blocking off our return. Where's the fucking exit? Lacey said under her breath. Come on. She checked her phone again, hoping for a signal, but still found nothing. I just held her hand and focused on continuing forwards. The sky was getting darker, and I could hear the movement amongst the corn. They were coming. There's something up ahead, Lacey said. I think I see the exit. We broke into a run, sprinting for the escape. Sure enough, there was a clearing just ahead of us. Maybe it was a way out. It had to be. As we emerged into the clearing, though, we realized the truth. It was not an escape. This was something else entirely. My breath caught and the blood froze in my veins as I looked at the figures around us. All human. All strung up like scarecrows. I could see the family we discovered earlier amongst the corpses. But there were so many more. 15, 20 perhaps. Maybe even more. There are 2 empty ones, Lacey said softly, and my eyes were drawn to them. They were set up to face each other, and somewhere, in the deepest part of my mind, I knew why. We wouldn't be dead when they mounted us. They wanted us to watch each other die. That was where the thrill was, wasn't it? The corn rustled behind us, and I turned to see Peppa Pig watching from the edge of the corn. It may have just been the darkness, but I could have sworn she was smiling. I could have sworn that her mouth was open, and I could see drool dribbling down her chin. Lacey took my hand, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. We both took a step back as Peppa Pig loomed into the clearing. I could see Elsa and Woody behind her. I could hear the rustling of their movements. They moved bonelessly and shuffled forwards. It was inhuman and strange to watch, but they did it all with a single-minded purpose. They had come for us, and nothing would deter them. Let's go, I said. Run, run! She didn't need to be told twice. Again, we ran, breaking through the wall of corn ahead of us. This time, we had no direction. We just wanted to get away from the horrible things that were following us. And I didn't know if that was even possible at this point. We ran blindly, hands linked as we fled, swatting corn out of our way. We ran until we broke through the corn one last time and stumbled out into the main event area. Lacey broke down crying as she saw the haunted house we'd been through. I saw the pony giving its final ride of the day. "We're out! We're out!" She threw her arms around me and I hugged her in return. She laughed that laugh I'd fallen in love with, and I was laughing too. Until I saw it. At the edge of the corn, I could see Peppa Pig watching us. I held my girlfriend closer, leering at the creature that had hunted us, silently praying it would retreat. It did. Slowly, Peppa Pig pulled back until she vanished into the corn. She'd been there for only a few seconds, long enough to let us know how close they'd been to catching us. Then they were gone, and so were we. We didn't report the bodies to the police. Lacey didn't agree with that, but I knew she understood. I didn't know if the police would even find any bodies. And even if they did, my story about being chased by Peppa Pig and Elsa through a corn maze would only sound too insane to warrant checking out. Even if I'd lied and only said that I'd discovered the bodies, the police would still have questions I couldn't answer. In the end, it was easier not to bother. I love Lacey. One day, I want to marry her. She's my best friend, and she is the love of my life. She's my partner in crime and in everything else. I would do anything for her and with her. But I will never return to Downey Farms, regardless of what her family tradition is. And I don't think she will either. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupeHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward. And if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you, which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.